Hello everyone, Edain here and welcome back to the Edain Mod, where today I will be ranking every faction again, but this time instead of from easiest to hardest to play, from strongest to weakest. And a lot of this is my own personal preference, but I imagine a lot of people will agree. If you do disagree with any of my positions for some of these factions, do let me know. I've tried to be as unbiased as possible, but a lot of these are still going to be my own preference as to what I think is the strongest and the weakest factions. And we're going to begin. Number one, let's take a guess. Is it going to be Gondor or Aror? Of course it's Gondor. Gondor is, by my opinion, at the moment, the strongest faction. Not just because of the beautiful rework that they've had with the models and a few things like Faramir, but just in general, they're just really strong. They have every tool in their kits they need. They have simple mechanics, a large castle, a versatile hero roster, lots of really good powers, and strong defences. They've got the largest number of pros I'm going to have for this video. I've run down a whole list of pros and cons for every faction. And Gondor just excels in nearly every category. They have got a lot of choices for base buildings, but that's because they have a larger base to work with. You've got that material to work with, however you want to do it. And you have to manage the formations for your base units, which is not a problem. And if you get good at it, you get rewarded with a power that makes your units even stronger just for using the formations. Okay, on to number two. For number two, I have chosen Angmar. And for a lot of the reasons that I've made Gondor the strongest, Angmar is very close to being the strongest because they've got amazing early game creep control. They can make pikemen earlier than any other faction, so early warg or troll lairs, which generate more economy than basic goblins, spiders, etc. They can deal with them. And they also have axe throwers, so even like barrow white lairs are not a problem because slash damage does a lot of damage to barrow whites if you keep them away from attacking you. We've got vast wealth through tributes, which no other faction has the tribute mechanic. And if you can expand early on, you're not going to have any economy problems. And that's the only reason why they're not the strongest, is because you have to worry about that. And they are, by my opinion, the most powerful evil faction late game. Amazing heroes, amazing roster. Witch King new update makes Angmar even more powerful in late game because of either going thralls, which is amazing because you get more just power from your thrall units, and Witch King has a lot of personal damage. Or you go Men of Cardoon, so your Men of Cardoon are even stronger. You have a map, you just have freezing rain on the Witch King as a level 1 ability. Amazing. Although they do rely on, as I've said already, they rely on their settlements. They got no good cavalry until the very end of the game when you get Stronghold of the Iron Crown. And they've got the most split up hero roster with two separate heroes on two separate outposts, and one or two heroes on every military building except for the Wild Cage, which is a good thing, or the Beast Cage, whatever it's called. The building that I never make because it has no reason to be made. Next up are the Dwarves of Erebor. Again, a lot of reasons why, same as Gondor, as to why they're so strong. Strong and simple. Small roster, unlike Gondor. And every unit they have is powerful and has several purposes in a battle. Axe throwers for massive slash damage. Melee is amazing. Reducing enemy armor is amazing. Even the phalanx, if they're not fighting monsters or cavalry, can just become even more powerful than melee. And the Archangard are just busted. They're so strong. Do not nerf them though, Edain team. They are perfect. And if you also build Dale, that's one of the other main reasons why Erebor is so high up at the moment, in my opinion, is because of Dale. Dale and the economy it provides is one of the things that keeps Erebor up above everyone else. Amazing potential with the extra caravans you can just send out to settlements and just build up. And you're just aggressive and unmovable. An army of Archangard is nearly unstoppable. You keep some Dale archers in, which are your only source of pierce damage, and even monsters will fear you. But you are also a slow to move around faction. You have to consider that some factions will be faster than you and more versatile factions can actually just completely bait you and force you to make stupid choices and mistakes that can just really ruin a game. You struggle against monsters, as I've already said. Without Dale archers, you have no pierce damage. So any troll can just walk up to you, and as long as the phalanx are not around, you're not going to really be able to do anything about it. And things like Mumakil are your biggest nightmare. Let's make that very clear. Mordor is very powerful against Erebor because of their lack of pierce damage without Dale. And they also have the smallest, one of these smallest hero rosters of the dwarves. They have some good early game heroes like Nori and I was about to say Gimli, but Gimli's not an early game hero. You can get him early and he'll do amazing throughout the entire game because Gimli is amazing. But you do have to be careful that your roster of heroes is very limited. Next up is Aror. Very similar to Gondor, but with a few things different. They're almost as strong as Gondor. They are lacking a few things like not having the fiefdom system. Instead, they have the Linden Elves. They don't have Dol Amroth, and they don't have Imrahil. Instead, they have Glorfindel and the Glorfindel Windriders, which are not an improvement, by the way. And to be fair, the Enlarged Outpost in general needs a little bit of looking at, I think. Not visually, just mechanically. A few things like the Windriders, maybe have a melee unit in there as well, because you're missing out on the Dol Amroth foot soldiers, which are imperative to your melee frontline force with Gondor for that extra damage leadership. You don't get that with Aror. You've got to work with only your Palace Guard and then your elite spearmen. You've only got basic spearmen with Aror. You don't have the Citadel Guard. And your ring heroes both debuff your faction, but to be fair, they don't have... Obviously, the ring hero isn't a thing that will happen in every single game. You can turn it off. But if you get the ring, you want to protect it from your enemies. You have the choices of Gandalf, the Dark, or Arvedui, the hates everything that isn't elite guy. And then you've got an entire roster that has been weakened because you've got one of those two ring heroes. But again, that's only with ring heroes. Other than that, they are pretty much just as strong as Gondor, if not stronger in certain scenarios where cavalry is not an issue. If you've got no problems dealing with cavalry, so for example Angmar, Aror will do better 80% of the time, I'd say. Okay, on to number 5. We have Rohan. Although they are one of the easiest factions to learn and are very aggressive, they do have some weaknesses. But let's go into strengths first. Best cavalry potential in the game. And make sure you listen when I say potential. Not the best cavalry, because we've already done a tier list on cavalry, and we can already see that they're not even in the top 2. But they have got some of the best potential. And that in itself makes it so they can do amazing things with their cavalry. All their heroes can get mounted. And they have an incredibly fast and aggressive playstyle, which no other good faction other than Lothlorien has even a smidgen of. Erebor, you could say, yes, it is aggressive, but Rohan's ability to spam peasants is something that Erebor will never be able to do, even with Dale. Because peasant spam is just absurdly powerful, given you can make flour mills and farms on your base and settlements, so you can just spam them out. But you do need to pay attention to the fact that without an outpost, you have no elite infantry. If your opponent starts getting full upgrades for their troops and counters your basic peasants and cavalry army, then you're going to start to struggle. You're going to start to fall behind because your late game isn't as cemented without a really powerful cavalry army. But if your enemy counters that, you're going to need to go into peasants. And if you don't have that, you're going to need an outpost. Outpost is crucial to Rohan in the late game, especially against dangerous pikeman factions like Gondor, like Eisengard, and there's one other, Imladris. Those are the 3 key factions you need to worry about. Angmar is kind of there, but kind of falls off a bit because Men of Khaldun aren't that scene anymore. At least the pikemen aren't, because of the nerfs. Also, Theoden. If you don't cure Theoden, you're missing out on your faction leader, your best hero, So if you don't get the tier 4 power, the middle power, you're going to be really struggling. And that's why I always get it very early on into my games. It's normally my second power I get. And also, peasants take a long time to recruit. So if your opponent focuses those farms down, because they're weaker than normal military buildings that have more defenses and more health, these farms are going to be easier to knock down, and that's your main recruitment structure. If you lose them, you don't have them in your main base, you're going to have to rely on cavalry and range units. You definitely need to have at least 1 flour mill in your base, maybe even 3, I'd say, is the most optimal number if you're struggling with settlements. Once you get enough settlements, change them into flour mills, or even just vice versa. Keep the flour mills in your base and just build stud farms outside of the base. Next up, we have the Misty Mountains, the newest faction added to the game. Still is really strong overall, but is not as strong as it was, and it is not as strong as the factions before it. Has amazing spam potential. Again, potential. Not always going to be amazing spam. You need to have a lot of key things working with you. If you don't know the core mechanics of the faction, you will not be able to get that spam running as well as possible. Largest beast and monster roster, with it coming from your main base, from settlements, from outposts, and even summons. You can get monstered permanently through summons, as in tier 4 and tier 2 summons, because they're technically layers count as summons. And obviously the free build system means on large wide open maps we have enough space to get 1 or 2 goblin towns for amazing economy. Even scavenger doesn't feel necessary because you're just raking in more money than any other faction. But you need to be wary of, you have a squishy infantry units, which your best units are these Gundabad goblins, and even they are not as good as other factions' elite troops. They are about the same as like Urukai, maybe a little bit weaker than Urukai, I'd say, just because of the nature of the Misty Mountains. You don't want to be spamming melee, you want to be going monster. You've got to also have a very, 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 very careful look at enemy air units, because you have little to no archer support. You have goblin archers, which are the archers you get from the goblin settlements, and Moria goblin archers, which are versions that have poison arrows. The tier 1 archers is all you've got. Other than that, you've got to work with the dragons and Smaug. You've got to have the cold drakes and Smaug to be your protection in the sky, because otherwise you have no way of protecting against Plea of the Eagles, the Nazgul on Fell Beasts, Radagast the Brown, and obviously other Misty Mountains factions that have the cold drakes and Smaug. And also, as I said, if you don't have all that free space to free build, like this Gundabad Citadel or the Goblin Town Citadel, you're going to find that building those extra free builds that you get is going to actually run you down. It's going to make it more difficult for you to expand in a good way, and you just end up building Gundabads, which take up very little space, instead of Goblin Towns, which are your main form of economy outside of settlements. Next on the list, we have the Dwarves of Ered Luin. Considered by me to be the most difficult to use dwarves, I think are actually the second strongest dwarves. And that's not just because of the update to Lake Town. Their incredibly strong and diverse hero roster makes them incredible on nearly every scenario against every faction. You've got Dwalin for AoE damage and hero slaying. You've got Thorin for map-wide buffs, invincibility, scavenger, and movement speed, which is already insane with Ered Luin having the fastest dwarves in the game. And they have, as I kind of was already saying, they have answers to everything. Botha has his pickaxe you can throw at people. He has this pot that you can summon with Bomber to heal. You can make the shields with Balin. You can get extra experience with Balin. You just get so many tools in your kit that you never run out. And Bilbo with Treasure of the Master Thief is possibly the best scout hero that you can get for any faction. Very few exceptions to that rule. Bilbo with the Treasure of the Master Thief, 600 gold, can disrupt enemy factions that, or enemy AI factions that just see it and want to go for it. You can ruin the day of the AI. Although, as I'm saying all of this, you do require good micromanagement skills, which I did go over in the previous video ranking factions. They're the weakest stats of the dwarves. They may have the best speed, but the lowest health and the lowest attack do belong to the Eredluin dwarves. Erebor has the best attack, and the Iron Hills have the best health. And their battle wagon upgrades, the archers on their battle wagons and the little crossbow, along with the Eredluin catapults, are the worst of their type. Erebor gets better crush damage and the basic 2-shot. Iron Hills gets a weakening effect, more health, and their triple shot catapult is stupidly good. Stupidly good. But yeah, other than those few things, never shy away from Eredluin. Next up, we have one of my favourite factions just to play in general, although I haven't touched them a lot recently, I will admit, Mordor. They've just always got something going well for them. The free orc spam, so they never run out of money, so they can get that extra pantries for more orcs, for their heroes, etc, etc. A large hero roster, as you can see they have 5 Nazgul in one unit, 2 more Nazgul in the base, Sauron, Gorbag, Gothmog, Moloch, Witch King, Kamul. And then you can even summon Shelob for a little bit. You can get Power of Passages to make Sauron go mega death. And then you've got Grond as well. You've just got so many different heroes as Mordor. Probably the second largest hero roster next to Angmar or Gondor. And they also just get stronger with Sauron. The stronger Sauron gets, the stronger your Nazgul gets. The stronger abilities Sauron has to use, which normally happens with everyone, but with Sauron it's particularly more impactful because of the influence of Sauron. Once you hit that level 3 that level 3 point, the sky is the limit because you can upgrade any building you want, get more money, get upgrades, turn wights that have been hit by Morgul blades into your own single entity unit, which is amazing. You just get it all. However, do keep in mind you need to focus on sorting out all those quests. Get a Nazgul, get the Overseers, get an outpost, make an outpost unit. By outpost unit, I mean the 2 heroic units you get through those Dol Guldur and Minas Morgul outposts. Get all 9 Nazgul, have a lot of orcs, upgrade an orc to level 5, upgrade orcs with fire arrows, get trolls, get siege works leveled up. All that stuff, you got to do it. You got to do as many of them as possible, because if you don't, you're going to fall behind, guaranteed. Orcs are trash on their own, so that is why you need your heroes to be constantly on the field, but you also need to make sure they don't get killed by hero slayers, because a lot of them are very weak, especially the Nazgul that aren't these 5. The single entity Nazgul are quite weak until you get them his Deadliest Servants upgrades. Give them their armor or the Ring Hunter, so you can get them onto their Fell Beasts and just rain death from above, because without archers is going to be made easy prey from those Fell Beasts. On to the last 4, we have the Elves of Imladris, which are all looking away from me. There we go. As much as I love this faction and their strong elite roster, you have to be wary of, obviously, being how single turn every single unit is. You have to make every unit matter. They have the heroes complement the faction really well. Arwen can give you healing on your units. She can make enemies run away. She can heal heroes. Eladon and Elro here are one of the strongest hero killer combo in the game. Blade prison someone down. Weapon master for critical hits. Get even more critical hits and more damage. Everyone gets more damage around their enemy hero. They can they can hide. They can get more armor or more experience. You got Elrond with his horses that do massive magic damage. So anything, including Army of the Dead, can be knocked out by Elrond. No one messes with the big E. No one messes with the big E. And you also got Glorfindel, which I was knocking on a little bit with Arnor, but with Imladris, he is far more powerful and impactful because of how easy he is to get through just having a green pasture instead of having an outpost. You also have ridiculously fast recruitment, possibly the most ridiculous recruitment speed outside of like Call the Horde, because of Eristor. You put him into a barracks, put him into a green pasture, put him into a siege works. Your units will you'll just be printing units out. As long as you've got the money for it, you can just keep printing out units. As I said, or as I said already, every unit matters. These 5 elves cost 500 resources. That is 2.5 of 2.5 Gondor soldier units, which would be a total of 30, 45. No, but say 47. It'd be about come on, math brain. 38. It'd be about 38 entities is worth this entire unit, and this unit could kill 38 entities of Gondor soldiers on their own. But units like archers are really powerful against Imladris units because all those shots are going against one entity, and those entities are not weak, are not resistant to archers. They just have a big health pool. And because of this, you can very easily get resource problems if your units just keep constantly dying. So you need to start making some ways around it. But if you don't, you're going to fall behind, and also you got limited castle build plots for your faction, which I don't think should be changed. But I do like the healing posts on the walls for Imladris. It does help a lot to negate the lack of build plots. But yeah, always consider that Imladris needs healing, which is why they are the only faction that has the heal power embedded still in their kit. Okay, next up we have the last of the dwarves, the Iron Hills dwarves. As much as I love this sub-faction, the dwarves, they're the faction I've only played once in the Edain Mod since Erebor and Erebor and Ered Luin had the Dale and Lake Town upgrades, which have made them, honestly, me want to play them even more. The only reason I play the Iron Hills is to use the Ram Riders. Honestly, they're the one thing that keeps them going. But let's firstly talk about all the positive and negatives that I have written down so we don't fall off topic. They are the tankiest dwarves, as I kind of mentioned already. They have the highest health pools of all dwarves. And some of their units do just have more base damage than the Ered Luin dwarves. But the Ered Luin dwarves can get more ways of dealing damage through micromanaging with sharpened axes, triple that the flanking damage, which if you use it properly is a amazing tool. But also you have half a dozen ways of just reducing enemy attack values, which means that it's going to be doing less damage overall. But you also get the Ram Riders, which are another way of weakening enemy units. The only dedicated cavalry unit of the dwarves, and they are amazing. You need to do a few little steps to get them first. Elite equipment and Narin, but once you've done all that, spend the money on them, and you'll never want to look back. However, as I've kind of mentioned, the fact that I've not talked about their outpost at all, I still think their outpost is weak. It's a nice little upgrade what they've done to it. Nice little look, but it does need improvement still, I feel. It still feels too... I hate to say the word vanilla because it's not vanilla, but it still feels too much like it doesn't have the right tools. And it's really hard to explain, but compare it to Dale and Lake Town, it doesn't feel like it belongs. It's such a weird one. The outpost for the Iron Hills is just a weird one for me. I just don't like it. They're another faction that is kind of slow in respects to like Ered Luin. To Erebor, they're about the same speed, but of course that's just for most dwarves. But you have to also take into account that the enemy attack buffs, like leaderships, Rallying Call, Horn of Gondor, Darkness, those negate the debuffs that your units give out. So all you're doing is you're making it so the damage goes back to being 100% instead of being 120%, for example. Even with the full, I think 90% damage debuff you can get using all the Iron Hills tools, the trophies from Erin Mithrin Bastion, the Battle Wagon heads, the Ram Rider Trample, the damage reduction from the shields of the Pavas for Draw, and the tower shields of the Iron Hills Guardians. Even after all of that, if a unit has raw damage, it does not matter. They're still going to be dealing a lot of damage, and this faction, unfortunately, does have the problem of being slower to react, and prolonging combat for too long can sometimes be a really bad thing. Especially since the dwarves don't have a lot of reactionary powers that just do damage straight away. Like Gondor with Army of the Dead, Gundabad with Balrog, Rohan with Last March of the Ents, etc, etc. But anyway, I've talked enough about the Iron Hills Dwarves, and that is why I've put them this far down. Next, probably still one of my favourite factions, Lothlorien. As much as I love this faction, I can very easily understand why a lot of people don't like this faction, and I can understand that it is still one of the weakest factions in the game. Not bad though, it's not a bad faction, it is just weak. Because even though they have the magical Silverthorn arrows, and Moddb has them as well now with Goldthorn arrows, so they're not completely unique, if that makes any sense. Their powers complement uniqueness of the faction. So, like for example, the Elven Wood is probably the most impactful middle tier power of any faction, because it allows you to use Ambush of the Wood Elves. It turns enemies away cowering in fear. It can shroud your units just naturally. And it can also be given the Refuge in the Woods power, which means that it will heal any entity that is near it, that is an ally. Not just your own units, but other allies as well. And you negate most of your supply line penalties. So economy is normally never a problem with Lothlorien, unless you are spamming constantly, getting all your upgrades on time, and getting your heroes, your big heroes like Galadriel and Celeborn, out early. However, as I have already kind of said, but not really said in a negative way, the stealth mechanic for the elves is very easily forgotten. Even though you've got the enchanted mist of your main base and of the magic elven wood, you can still just forget to press that button. And especially if you're someone like me who doesn't micromanage a lot, they just build a death ball and throw it at people. With Lothlorien, you've got to have all your units separated, so you can activate that Ambush of the Wood Elves at a pivotal moment, get that bonus damage or knockback to make sure it just works. And without the heavy armor of your main troops, a cavalry attack on a pure archer army is going to be devastating. Rohan is one of the most evil factions to play against as Lothlorien. But also the fact you need to rely upon the Mirkwood Outpost to get half your faction's units. Because all your Lothlorien troops are based around dealing damage and having faster movement speed and the bonus damage from Ambush of the Wood Elves. But the Mirkwood Elves are tankier, do the same amount of damage, but just do it with more health so they don't die as quickly. And then also just get more. They also have just the embedded knockback on their attacks that you typically go archer backline from Lothlorien with Galafrim and the base Lorien archers for the bonus damage from the ambush, but frontline Mirkwood elves because of their knockback attacks, and just give them a bunch of you have your basic Mirkwood warriors with negative 50 attack for plus 50 defense is incredible. Don't sleep on that. But yeah, without a Mirkwood outpost, you can't do any of this. And honestly, whenever you get an outpost, you should always just build it as Mirkwood anyway, despite how expensive it is, because the Lothlorien outpost is ass. And here we come to what I think is the weakest faction, and I think a lot of people would have guessed this without even looking at anything at the video. I think Eisengard is the weakest faction, just for so many reasons, but most of which I've already gone over. But I'm going to be going over just some pros and cons for the last faction before we wrap up the video. Eisengard has a powerful late game economy, has easy access to level 5 units and explosive siege units. But all of that you only ever see in the late game if the faction actually lives that long, which, to be fair, a lot of the time it don't. Because you have incredibly small starting roster with only 1 unit from your main base of infantry, 1 unit of cavalry, and then 2 units from a settlement building. And if you can't keep that settlement building, that's half your roster just disappeared, and you have to spend 1,000 resources to get the rest of your roster. And I'm not including siege here, because to be fair, despite the fact that Eisengard has the largest siege roster in the game, it's probably got some of the weakest siege in the game. And I want everyone to hear this with their chest. Eisengard has one of the weakest siege rosters in the game. Compared to the Iron Hills, compared to Mordor, their siege is ass. The explosive mines are one of the few things that make Eisengard unique, and is a siege unit that honestly feels disturbingly weak because of how easily it can be interrupted. Anyway, I got it off my chest. And they're also a very vanilla faction. And I could just sit here all day talking about everything, why I think Eisengard is the weakest faction. But I think a lot of people are going to agree with me on that sentiment. And yep, that is every single faction. Just trying to get a nice angle to end it off. I like getting my nice angles. Okay. There we go. So that is every single faction. So again, from strongest to weakest, we have Gondor, Angmar, the Dwarves of Erebor, Aror, Rohan, Misty Mountains, Dwarves of the Eredluin, Mordor, Imladris, the Dwarves of the Iron Hills, Lothlorien, and lastly, Eisengard. I hope everyone that wanted this list, because actually a few people wanted this list, have learned something. If they agree with all my choices, then good. I know the game as much as I hoped I did. But if a few of you disagree, I imagine it'll mostly be from personal preference, from personal experience. I imagine PvPers might have a few big changes, I'm not sure. But this is my experience playing PvE for years upon years. This is what I think of every single faction at the moment. A lot of those could change from just simple small changes. But for the most part, this is what I think of every single faction. Even though that I say these are the rankings for every faction. If I was to, I will mention, as I've already said before, I've done a ranking video from factions that I think are the easiest to play to hardest to play, and a few of them do change quite significantly. Imladris is a lot further down. The Dwarves of the Iron Hills are a lot further up. Gondor is exactly the same. Gondor, I feel like, is just the perfect faction for any new beginner player to learn and do well with. And I think everyone will agree with me with that. Meanwhile, Eisengard is the faction that you can start playing with, and it'll be easy. But when you start playing every other faction and every other mechanic in the game, you'll realise, oh, this faction doesn't feel up to scuff with everyone else. Anyway, hope you've all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Farewell.